Okay, great. Well, I think most people have entered from the waiting room, so welcome everyone. My name is Laura Shrake, and on behalf of the Council of the Great Lakes Region, I am very pleased to welcome you to our monthly Business and Sustainability webinar series. This webinar series is part of our growing Business and Sustainability Network that is supported in part by the Fred and Barbara Erb Family Foundation. And through this work, we are engaging organizations who share a commitment to strengthening the Great Lakes region and working together to identify and implement sustainable solutions. Solutions, for example, that can accelerate progress in the region on achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goal 12, responsible consumption and production, and transition us faster to a circular economy and a region free of plastic waste and litter. During the next hour, we have an opportunity to hear about the basics of advanced recycling, how it works, and how it could help create a new life for many of the products we use as consumers. Increasing the diversion and reuse of post-consumer plastics from landfills while reducing waste at source are key to achieving a circular economy in the Great Lakes region. Through today's webinar, we will learn about how the advanced recycling process could help us get closer to achieving zero plastic waste by diverting from landfill and creating a new life for harder to recycle plastics. Forging a future without plastic waste and litter is a huge task facing the Great Lakes region and watershed, as well as the rest of the world. According to a recent report from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, an estimated 81% of the Great Lakes post-consumer waste is lost to landfills, including valuable materials like plastic. And according to models developed by the Rochester Institute of Technology, 22 million pounds of plastic pollution could be entering the Great Lakes every year from the US and Canada. This data paints a clear picture that we have a long way to go, and no one level of government or sector will solve this sustainability challenge on their own. But by collaborating and acting with urgency and focus, we absolutely can solve this problem. That's why the Council of the Great Lakes region is working with cross-sector partners through the Circular Great Lakes Initiative, a collaborative initiative that seeks to end plastic waste by closing the loop and accelerating a circular economy for plastics across the region. We're doing this by driving action in 4 key areas: capture and cleanup, to stop plastic waste and litter from entering the Great Lakes; collection, processing, and end markets, to accelerate the development of plastic packaging, recycling, supply chains, and markets; policy, to achieve step change in plastics recycling through policy modernization; and consumer education, to build trust with consumers and increase recycling quality and quantity through consumer action. If you would like to learn about this initiative and how to get involved, we'll put a link and an email in the chat for you. Partners of the Circular Great Lakes Initiative represent different aspects of the plastics value chain, and today's webinar speaker is one of those partners. With us today, we have Laura Bishop, Sustainability and Community Engagement Manager at Imperial. Imperial is a Canadian petroleum company, and Laura will be sharing their evaluation of solutions and advanced recycling technology that can increase the plastic recycling rate and eliminate plastic from going to landfill or incineration. Following the presentation, we will be joined by 2 of Laura's colleagues, and we'll use the remaining time for Q&A. Plastic waste is a broad topic, and we have only just under an hour for today's webinar, so we will prioritize the Q&A for questions that are specific to today's topic on advanced recycling. But if you have any questions, please do enter them in the Zoom Q&A box. We do have a lot to get to, so it is now my pleasure to hand over to our guest speaker, Laura Bishop, Sustainability and Community Engagement Manager at Imperial. Over to you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the kind introduction and context setting. As you mentioned, who else is also on the call and will be joining for the Q&A are 2 very informed and active colleagues in the advanced recycling space. So we'll have Melanie Bauer, who's also our plastics circularity manager for ExxonMobil in the United States, and Kathy Porter, who is Imperial's Sarnia, Ontario chemicals manager. And they'll be joining to answer all of the tough questions. So if we take a look at the agenda for today, a few areas we want to explore, starting with a macro view of the global movement to reduce plastic waste and action and large-scale investment that's needed to get there. As promised, as part of the introduction, we'll do a deep dive on advanced recycling as an example of a large-scale solution being brought to the table by ExxonMobil and Imperial. And to remember the audience, you that's joining the webinar today, we want to make sure we talk about the benefits from the lens of what's important to you. So as we move into the discussion portion of this presentation and Q&A, we really look forward to hearing your perspective in your comments and questions about what you're hearing today about advanced recycling and how we can continue to work together to further collaborative solutions. We'll end by touching on the ever-evolving policy landscape around plastics. And if you're involved in this space, you'll know what I mean by that. It's quick moving and it's definitely a very highly engaged space for all of us. And feel free as we go along to pop questions just into the chat. I know Laura will be helping to facilitate those and tee them up at the end of the presentation. All right, let's jump in. So today it's estimated that only 9% of plastics used around the world are recycled. And to attack this challenge head on, governments around the world are setting ambitious targets to reduce plastic waste. For example, Europe's Green Deal states that all plastic packaging should be reusable or allow cost-efficient recycling by 2030. In the US, the EPA is aiming to increase the US national recycling rate by 50% by 2030. And in Canada, where I am based, provincial government ministers support a zero plastic waste by 2030 action plan. And to get there, significant investment is needed across the full value chain. So I'm excited today as we look at the journey to get there, because on this webinar, we have multiple perspectives and stakeholders represented. You are representing business, academics, government, and we also have environmental organizations joining us today. And I think that's really powerful because there is no silver bullet solution to solving our plastics waste challenge across North America. And we've just highlighted regional aspirational end states by 2030. But today there is no clear pathway to get there. However, what is clear is the need to have multiple enablers to help, which include things like consumer education, supportive policy, and investment across the full value chain from waste management infrastructure to complementary partnerships between mechanical and advanced recyclers that also include investments in things like secondary sortation, which we'll talk about. And if we kind of take a step back and compare this roadmap to, say, the climate change journey to net zero, over time, solutions have evolved and they've been scaled as a result of these enablers that we just mentioned. So what have we learned from the climate change journey? One aspect is let's not pick winners and losers in technology solutions out of the gate. We really will need many different solutions to get to a circular economy. So ExxonMobil and Imperial do share your commitment to reduce plastic waste in the environment. I think that's why we're all here, because we're passionate and we're engaged in this space and we want to see progress. And certainly the Circular Great Lakes Initiative is a key enabler to that, to those success. And we are investing as a company and as two companies in advanced recycling technology to drive circular solutions. So we'll kick off our discussion on advanced recycling with a short video.
Plastics make our day-to-day life possible. From preserving food for longer to helping make cars lighter and more fuel efficient, plastics are critical to enabling modern life. The challenge is what happens after plastics are used. According to the OECD, only about 9% of plastic is recycled, with the rest being sent to landfill, incineration, or worse, left as litter in the environment. At ExxonMobil's facilities in Baytown near Houston, Texas, we're turning plastic waste into new materials. With our Extend technology for advanced recycling, we're breaking down even the difficult to recycle plastics, transforming them into the raw materials that can be used to make many new products we rely on every day. The process begins by collecting and sorting used plastics that are difficult to recycle through mechanical means, from food packaging and bubble wrap to artificial grass. To achieve this on a large scale, more access is needed around the world to recycling, which will require collaboration, increased investment, and effective policy. And ExxonMobil is playing a leading role. This includes building new types of facilities that can sort and process more kinds of plastic waste than ever before, such as the one being developed in Houston by our joint venture, Cyclex. Once collected, sorted, and shredded, the plastic is delivered to our Baytown complex, where we are operating one of the largest advanced recycling facilities in North America. A truck feeds the shredded plastics directly into a large silo in a unit at our integrated petrochemical complex. The plastic is run through a dust collector, where impurities are removed, and then moves into a tank where it is mixed with hydrocarbon liquids. The plastic in the mixture is further shredded into smaller particles before being sent through heat exchangers, where it is warmed up to improve its viscosity. The mixture then enters a reactor, where we use heat to break the plastic down into molecules such as ethane and naphtha. These molecules are then combined with other feed streams throughout our facility to be made into a variety of critical products, such as new plastics. Through advanced recycling, we can provide customers with certified circular plastics. Our process is verified by a third party called ISCC, whose mass balance accounting is a way to connect the dots between the plastic waste we process and the certified circular plastics we then sell. This approach is similar to what is used to certify renewable electricity credits. These certified circular plastics have the same quality and performance as our existing products, with no contamination or degradation. This allows our customers to use certified circular plastics in all of the same applications as normal, without requalification. From high-performance food packaging and greenhouse films, to medical equipment and personal hygiene products. With ISCC Plus certified products, we can enable a more circular economy, in which difficult-to-recycle plastic waste is turned into new products instead of ending up in landfill. Not only are we deploying a technology that can process a wider range of plastics, plastic waste shows a lower greenhouse gas footprint than normal feedstock. Based on a carbon footprint assessment study conducted by Sphera of ExxonMobil's advanced recycling technology in Baytown, every 1,000 tons of waste plastics processed through our facility results in between 19 and 49% lower GHG emissions than processing the same amount of fossil-based feedstock. Our advanced recycling unit in Baytown, Texas is operational and is capable of processing more than 80 million pounds of plastic waste per year. This is equivalent to more than 300 Olympic-sized swimming pools filled with plastic bags that could have otherwise gone to landfill or incineration. And we're not stopping there. We plan to increase our capacity around the world with the ability to process more than 1 billion pounds per year of plastic waste by year-end 2026, bringing advanced recycling to multiple sites around the world. And we think there's more growth beyond that. With technology, collaboration, and effective policy, we can enable more of the plastics we rely on every day to be recycled, helping to meet society's goals for a more circular economy.
Okay, fantastic. Let's just take a minute to think through some of the highlights that we saw from that video and what's in it for you. We heard that advanced recycling technology diverts plastic waste that's otherwise destined for landfill or incineration. So specifically, we know this because we already have an advanced recycling project in operation in Houston. We also have proposed projects in Sarnia, Ontario, as well as in Illinois. And each project will reduce plastic waste by 80 million pounds per year. So this is plastic that can't be mechanically recycled today. And globally, overall, we expect to build 1 billion pounds per year to advance recycling capacity by year-end 2026 at multiple sites across our global manufacturing portfolio at ExxonMobil. So if you take away one soundbite today, really want to communicate that the technology is complementary to mechanical recycling. If a product, like a peat bottle, for example, can be recycled mechanically, it really should be. We don't want anything that can be mechanically recycled as part of our feedstock for advanced recycling. Mechanical recycling uses less energy, so that should be done in a mechanical way. We are leveraging also existing equipment. So we're not building anything new at our facilities, which means we can scale up quickly to supply brand manufacturers and others with certified circular polymers to meet our government's recycling content minimums regulations that are coming into effect and being developed right now in Canada and the US. And so by replacing virgin fossil fuel feedstock at the front end of our process with shredded plastic, as you saw from the video, the truck pulling up with the shredded plastic, from a GHG life cycle assessment and a third-party study of our Extend technology did show that every 1,000 tons of plastic waste processed does result in 19 to 49% lower GHG emissions than processing the same amount of fossil-based feedstock, which is a good thing. And we also, from a benefits perspective, it's really important to understand that advanced recycling will deliver products with identical performance and quality. So the breaking down of the feedstock to its molecular level through a heating process means that the performance quality is maintained from the products, which is, as we know, very important in the safety of food and medical packaging. So advanced recycling and mechanical recycling are different and do enter the value chain at different points. If you take a look at the top right of this diagram, it's your traditional mechanical recycling loop that many of us are familiar with. This is when mechanical recycling is cutting up plastic waste in order to form new plastic products. And so, as mentioned, we definitely support efforts to expand mechanical recycling wherever practical. And we are working with our customers to provide products that can make mechanical recycling as efficient as possible. However, we also know through other studies globally that mechanical recycling is not a complete solution to address the issue of plastic waste. As we know, a lot of plastic is still going to landfill and even worse in the environment. And it is technically and economically challenging to mechanically recycle products of multiple types of plastic. So for example, a chip bag or granola bar wrapper that we consume every day has a dual layer of material. So often you'll see an aluminum layer on the inside, plastic on the outside. So that mixed material is very difficult to recycle mechanically. And so that's something that we can process through advanced recycling, as well as plastics contaminated with food waste that requires extra sorting and cleaning in order to be processed. And this is really where the full diagram advanced recycling comes in. Other things that we can recycle that were mentioned, artificial turf. Currently, there is no home for that. That's going straight to a landfill once it's being used in industry. Bubble wrap, we all get Amazon packaging, all that bubble wrap that's contained, that cannot be mechanically recycled today. So if you put it in your blue bin thinking it's going to be recycled, it won't be. However, advanced recycling is stepping in and able to process bubble wrap. Motor oil bottles is another example. So it's plastics that otherwise would have gone to landfill or incineration. And the process itself is taking the plastic down to a molecular level through a heating process, which is turning them into raw materials that can then be used as feedstock to make a variety of new products, including virgin quality plastics. So really want to emphasize this process is not incineration. It's a closed loop process. There's absolutely zero presence of oxygen, so nothing can be burned because of that. And through advanced recycling, we're able to make and sell certified circular polymers, which are helping our customers meet their goals for sustainability and circularity. So I know that was a lot of information around the actual process, but from a simplified perspective, what does that mean for us as consumers, as families? Let's take a closer look at an example that's closer to home. So as you can see in this photo, through advanced recycling, we are able to make sales to customers of certified circular plastics for use in things like food packaging, healthcare, and other important applications. And these circular plastics will help brand manufacturers meet government pending regulations on recycled plastic content minimums. And the plastic waste we process is allocated to our certified circular plastics using a mass balance approach. And some of you may have heard and understand mass balance. It is an approach that's certified according to the International Sustainability and Carbon Certification, which is also referred to as ISCC+. And so this is a third-party certification approach that's similar to what is being done in renewable electricity, for example, and many other markets and industries, for example, sustainable farming. And these new certified circular plastics are being used right now in products that you can find on the shelves in stores, similar to this image. So taking a closer look at the types of plastic that advanced recycling is processing. We've already mentioned a number of these. These photos show some other examples of plastic we're processing in various stages of their sorting and collecting and cleaning. So we are targeting plastics that otherwise can't be mechanically recycled. So we mentioned bubble wrap and Amazon packaging. You can see that in the bottom lower left. Chip bags, cereal bags. We have cross-linked polyethylene plastic tubing. That's the bottom middle photo that you see. That's in a shredded form in the photo. Motor oil bottles we talked about on the top right. Artificial turf. So the top middle that shows artificial turf in a densified form. And then the top left shows a variety of materials we are processing in different colors and types. So what are some of the challenges we face to get this technology and enable it? One is actually the feedstock. And we did talk about full value chain investment and enablers to allow for solutions. Some of the issues, and I'm sure you are each facing, and we saw in some of the questions that were submitted, is that there is currently today in communities across North America, limited access to recycling. We all know friends and family, or maybe even ourselves, that do not have access to curbside or apartment recycling. And they may have longer drives in rural areas, 30 minutes to find a city drop-off center. So that's a challenge. There's also a lack of standards and mixed messaging and consumer education. As neighborhoods like in Ontario execute extended producer responsibility, municipalities are no longer in charge of the recycling programs, and each neighborhood potentially can have a different list of what can be put in their bins at their curb. So trying to understand that as a resident, and understanding what they can put in the blue bin and what can't be is confusing at times. Films and flexibles are not often collected at curbside. And though sometimes you can deposit them at your grocery store, this type of plastic is a huge opportunity that advanced recycling is focused on. There's also a lack of sorting capacity, and particularly to sort out those flexibles and other types of plastics, which is why ExxonMobil has helped start Cyclics, the collaborative that was mentioned in the video, and is investing in their first of its kind plastic recovery facility in the Houston area, which is expected to start up next year. And Melanie, who will be joining for the Q&A, would be happy to share more information about that partnership. So to conclude, the path forward means working together to bridge to solutions on both sides of the US and Canada border for communities, environment, government, and industry. We certainly share the federal government's goal to create a low carbon circular economy for plastics and to keep plastics from entering our environment, like the St. Clair River that is shown here in this image. The river, if you've been to this area, know that it leads to a beautiful Lake Huron, lake that's very important to the Circular Great Lakes Initiative. And to achieve these objectives, to get to that circularity economy, action is needed, as we've been talking about. To further accelerate investment in solutions, supportive policy is needed. And so from a broad lens, we need thoughtful policies that do take into account the full life cycle of greenhouse gas emissions of materials, that recognize the benefits of advanced and mechanical recycling technologies and encourage innovation. We need policies that allow certified circular plastics to be recognized as recycled content through the certified mass balance attribution approach, such as ISCC Plus that we mentioned. And then finally, we also need to see on a bit of a broader lens for everybody, well-designed initiatives to accelerate the collection of waste and support the sustainable reuse of recycling and plastic products and packaging. And finally, policies that help bring more communities access and equitable access to recycling programs, because the only way this is going to work is by collaborating alongside communities. So thank you for the opportunity to share this information, and Melanie, Kathy, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Thanks for that introduction to advanced recycling. As you noted, we need to evaluate many solutions and technologies that will allow us to divert plastics from landfill if we're going to achieve zero plastic waste. So thank you very much for that presentation on advanced recycling. For the Q&A session now, we will be joined, as mentioned, by two of Laura's colleagues. And it looks like they have their cameras on already, so great. We have with us Kathy Porter, Chemicals Business Manager, and Melanie Bauer, Sustainability and Plastics Circularity Manager. So thank you both for being here and joining Laura for this webinar. I want to go ahead and get started with some of the questions that have already come in. And we'll stick to the ones that are specific to advanced recycling. I will be making note, however, of other questions that that come in case we're not able to get to every question during the time we have today. So I will be making note of those. But let's see, Laura, Kathy, Melanie, I will just start with the questions and sort of leave it to the three of you to decide who's best to answer each one. But let's go ahead and get started with a question that has come in from Stephanie. And her question is, how would you best explain the benefits of advanced recycling to people who are pro-recycling, but think advanced recycling is a bad thing? It's a great question.
Well, thanks, Stephanie, for your question. This is exactly the dialogue we were hoping to have around the benefits. I think it depends from your perspective, what you see as important and valuable. We talked about several today. I think what's really important is the life cycle GHG story associated with this. We are backing out and reducing fossil-based feedstock, replacing it with shredded plastic. And for me, I know, as a mom, as a grandma, maybe one day, that I want to see progress in this space. That's why I'm at the table at an energy company. And the fact that we are diverting such a large amount of plastic that otherwise would have gone to a landfill or be burned or end up in one of the Great Lakes is really exciting for me, that we can invest this and start to divert that waste and make real change. I turn it over to Kathy and Melanie to highlight some of the other benefits that's important to them.
Yeah, Laura, I would just add, I think your response was great. And, I think when you look around the world, and that we have a 9% recycling rate for plastics materials, more new technology is needed in order to create a circular space for plastics. And so when you look at some of the hard to recycle plastics like flexible film, multi-layer films that are used in food packaging operations, plastics that are used in sensitive end uses like the medical field or personal care field, there's just different requirements that come with those applications. And that's what advanced recycling provides, because you're converting the plastic at the molecular level. You're able to produce a circular product that can be used in some of those sensitive end use applications and meet the performance needs as well as the regulatory needs for those products.
Thank you both. And we'll go ahead and move to the next question that has come in, which is from Chris, who is asking, or let's see, he states, many advanced recycling operations were close to fully running, but haven't. What needs to be done for this technology to succeed?
I can start. I think Laura did cover a lot of that in what we were talking about today. It's a great question. There's a lot of challenges, and with that whole value chain that Laura showed in her presentation, there's so many different groups and collaborations that are needed to make this work. But some of the key things that are really important is that consumer education, so people know what can be recycled and making it easy for people to get material recycled. And then we need supportive policy. Really there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty right now and a lot of questions about what advanced recycling is. And that's part of why we're having these discussions, to help answer some of those questions, because we really need that recycling to be able to, or advanced recycling to be able to count towards our recycling targets and help us get to that more circular economy. And then probably one of the biggest things we need to be able to do to increase our overall recycling rates is having more standardization and ability to collect and sort all that feedstock, that plastic waste valuable feedstock. So some standardization of what can be sorted and collected that will ultimately help create the feedstock that is needed for these investments that are going to be happening. I don't know, Melanie or Laura, if you had anything else to add on that.
Yeah, I would just dig in, like, the next layer on the regulatory certainty piece. The laws that are on the books today were written for mechanical recycling, because that's the technology that existed at the time. And so advanced recycling is a different solution. And so we really have to get policy and standards updated to recognize the differences between chemical recycling and mechanical recycling, in order for both technologies to count towards those recycling, goals, mandates, whether it be a recycling rate or like a recycled content type of goal.
Great, thank you. The next question is, let's see, around with the province of Ontario moving to an extended producer responsibility model, EPR. What do you see as the role for municipalities in delivering this solution?
I can take a stab at that, as I live in Ontario, and actually I'm based in Sarnia, and in July we just started the first phase of the EPR rollout in Sarnia. And although the producers will be paying for the recycling system through the EPR programs, municipalities can still be a big important part of the system. And so the producer responsibility organizations that are ultimately responsible to ensure that the plastics are being recycled, they're going to be looking for service providers to deliver those recycling solutions. And in many cases, those municipalities already have infrastructure in place. And so they could become one of the service providers still as part of that overall value chain. And then another key role I think they can play, and I mentioned earlier about consumer education, but the more we can do to create an inviting atmosphere to attract investment in our regions, or especially around different technologies for recycling, that will also help increase taxes or increase jobs and create investment in that area. And the last comment I'll make is that EPR primarily covers residential sources. So another way that municipalities can help support is the collection from the different municipal or commercial or institutional sources within their communities to help increase our overall supply of the very valuable plastic waste feedstock that will be needed for our advanced recycling operations.
And Kathy covered a lot of great suggestions and ideas there. And if you are a municipality, I know we have a few on the webinar today. I don't think everyone can see the chat, but please, if you've got comments on what role you think a municipality should play in delivering the solution, please add your comments if there's challenges that you're facing, because we can work with the Circular Great Lakes to take those away as well and understand your perspectives and consider that as we're looking at projects to do together to reduce plastic waste.
Yeah, a good point, Laura. Thank you. And there's another question that has come in, also addressing municipalities. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it next. And it's asking, how do we best create value-added waste partnerships with municipal and private sector partners? So I don't know if there's anything you want to add on to the last question with this one.
Well, I think the work that you're doing, Laura, and Mark and Abby and Ali and others in the Great Lakes Initiative is a great example of that, right? These collaborative partnerships. And I think I just turn it over to Melanie, who's living the example in Houston where this project wouldn't have gone forward without public-private partnerships. Talk a little bit about what we're doing with Cyclics.
Yeah, we certainly believe that public-private partnerships are really important. And, as Laura mentioned, one of the gaps that we see for the kind of overall supply chain recycling infrastructure is around the collection and sortation of all plastics materials. And so one of the initiatives that we're involved in is with the city of Houston, where we have a partnership with the city, with another company, LyondellBasell, the recycling center in the Houston area, and Cyclics, where we're really looking to increase the recycling rate, which is very, very low in this area for plastics materials. And so, we've come together. One of the areas that we're funding is to build out what we're calling a Cyclics circularity center, which is $100 million investment into basically secondary sortation infrastructure. We're also working with one of our master planned communities called Kingwood, where we've expanded their recycling drop-off location to include accepting all plastics materials. So on the weekend, residents can come drop off all of their recyclable material, and then the plastic material will go to the circularity center and be sorted, where then material that can be mechanically recycled will go to that technology. Material that needs to go to chemical recycling will go and flow that way. We're also working with the school district in the area to provide an avenue for bringing back recyclable materials through the school system. Related to the drop-off location in Kingwood, given its success, they've already had to bring in additional take back containers, if you will, and the city is looking at replicating what we've done there in other parts of the city because of how successful it's been. So we really think, you know, that public-private partnership is really important in getting the needed infrastructure and funds into the system to address some of the gaps that currently exist.
Thanks, Melanie. Yeah, I'm curious with the public-private partnership that you just used as an example in the beginning. How easy or challenging was that to get that off the ground?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of excitement. In terms of, you know, a lot of this, right, is around just making sure you're aligning with stakeholders who all have the same goals, right? And so you know, we see that one of the other things that we're a part of is like the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, where they're funding solutions around the world. And so, you know, when you look at solutions and you look at what's needed to make a step change or systems change in a given location, it's really important that you know, all the stakeholders are excited, passionate, and aligned on what you're trying to address. And so we've just had this great partnership with all of our stakeholders in the City of Houston collaboration.
That's great to hear. Yeah, and Laura, thank you for starting off the answer to that question, mentioning the circular Great Lakes, because it's certainly something that I wanted to suggest as well as considering involvement, whether it's a municipality or the private sector, of really getting involved in that circular Great Lakes initiative, where we're identifying and implementing solutions together that we can take forward. So thanks for bringing that up. And Melanie, you mentioned funding, and I think Laura, you had mentioned funding earlier also, which will lead me to the next question that came in from Cindy. And she says, we need community support and step-by-step instructions to encourage buy-in and get this set up in our community. How do we fund? Do you have a response for that?
Yeah, I can start. I think what you're highlighting is kind of part and parcel what Melanie's been talking about, which is the important gap that that needs to be addressed in the supply chain infrastructure in place today, and you know, particular within communities. And so equitable access to recycling is an example, and Melanie talked about Houston, and you know, we've all been in different cities, and you know, we don't see recycling bins, and it's really frustrating. And it you know, and frankly, a lot of us bring recycling home with us in suitcases, etc., because you can't imagine that we're throwing cardboard in the garbage. And so some basic infrastructure needs to be supported. So consumer education with voters and others is really important around that. I'll pass it over to Melanie and Kathy if there's any other comments that you'd have for communities.
Yeah, I think, you know, just specific to a given community, what, you know, is making your voice heard and reaching out and saying that this is a service that you want within your local area. I mean, there's certainly a lot of work to do, right? I mean, like in the US, there's about, you know, 50% of, you know, the US doesn't have access to recycling today. And so, you know, and if you look at a report that the Recycling Partnership issued a couple of years ago, you know, there's about a $17 billion investment that's needed over kind of a 5-year period to really dramatically increase the recycling rate for all materials, not just plastics. And so, you know, part of that is funding that infrastructure gap that exists, providing equitable access, and continuing education on what can and can't be recycled. And so, you know, but specific to a given community, I think it's really important that we use our voices to say that this is something that's important to us and that we want to see in our local community.
Yeah, and one question that came in was asking about the IRA and if the IRA provides any funding for recycling infrastructure. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, it does actually provide funds. So it provides about $275 million towards recycling grants. And it looks like they'll try to allocate that at like $55 million per year over, kind of a 5-year period. And so last I had heard, I mean, it sounds like submissions are going into and being evaluated. So hopefully we'll see some of the benefits from some of that funding in the future.
Another question that has come in regarding, let's see, this one's from Carrie, and she's asking, how will advanced recycling address PVC, polyvinyl chloride?
So what I can say about our advanced recycling is we do have one benefit of advanced recycling is that it can expand the types of plastics that can be processed, especially like mixed plastics, polyethylene and polypropylene, for example, that can't be mechanically recycled. But we do have limitations because of the metallurgy in our operation that really limits the amount of chlorides that can be in our feed that we can process. So the short answer to the question is advanced recycling isn't really viable for a PVC type material. I know, Melanie, you probably might be able to comment a little bit more about PVC recycling and options.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting, right, about using the term advanced recycling or chemical recycling is it's really an umbrella term for multiple technologies that, like Laura shared in the video shared, you're using chemistry to convert polymer molecules into smaller molecules that are then raw materials to be made into new products. And so for us, for the technology that we're deploying, PVC is hard for us to take, like Kathy shared, due to the chlorine content and the concern around corrosion and the results of processing that material. But from a bigger picture, when we think about like addressing this, like going back to this collection, sortation, infrastructure gap, if you start to collect all plastics, right, then there's different technologies that are best suited for different types of plastics. And PVC is actually recycled today. And if you go to like the Vinyl Institute's website, you'll see that, I mean, they recycle 50 to 100 million pounds of vinyl each year. And so if you start to, develop this system where you're aggregating all the types of materials that are out in society today, then there's these different solutions that are available for the different types of plastics.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. There is another question that has come in about increasing recycling. How can recycling be increased in rural areas that are more challenging with longer distances to recycling centers? I know, I guess this isn't specific on advanced recycling, but do you want to try to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, Laura, do you want me? I guess my thought on that, and then I'll open it up to my colleagues, is, I mean, it's really important to provide, recycling access to everyone. Now, what that looks like may be different given where you are from a geographical standpoint. And, so there's not, just like with recycling technologies, there's not a one size fits all approach, and so we really see, the need to roll out different options. So whether that's a store drop off type of option or something like kind of a transfer station, a community drop-off location where kind of like in the Kingwood example I mentioned earlier, where all your recyclables are dropped off and then, on a somewhat frequent basis that gets picked up and then delivered to a recycling center. Or maybe it's, curbside access like some of us have, but there's just going to be multiple avenues that need to be provided in order to get everyone access to recycling.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, the world has turned its attention to plastic waste being a global issue and a major problem. And we saw that in the global treaty negotiations in Paris at the end of May. And so there is a lot of work being done in communities across the world on this and sharing best practices of what's working in one community and how efficiently programs are being developed in collaboration with municipalities and with residents is a huge win. And so, you know, another shameless plug for the circular Great Lakes, but this is how we're going to get at these targets faster, is sharing information and working together. And so really strongly encourage, you know, if you see ideas or you see things that are working in one region, share that, be part of these platforms where people are and different groups are coming together with different types of resources that can help and really enable that full value chain to help with the overall solution.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's only through collaboration and everybody coming to the table that we're really going to accelerate these solutions. The next couple of questions are around sort of emissions and energy. And I know, Laura, you had touched on the reduction GHG a little bit earlier, but a question that has come in is about stack test results available for air emissions with the advanced recycling. Do you have anything that to address this question? Any examples or information?
Well, I'll just start by sharing that we for our operations, and you know, as we look at our potential project in Sarnia, Ontario, as an example, you know, we've talked to Indigenous communities about the project, and what we've shared is that we would be operating under existing air and environmental permits. So if you remember back to our discussion around this is technology that will replace virgin fossil fuel feedstock, a portion of that, with the shredded plastic. And because this is a closed loop process, there is no oxygen present in the process itself, and no incineration. And so very, you know, the communities were very pleased to hear that we would be operating under existing air and environmental permits, and no new permits would be required. Turn over to Melanie, because they are in operations in Houston, if there's anything additional you'll add.
Yeah. So, you know, our facility in Baytown, Texas is up and running at commercial scale, and we are processing the plastic that we're bringing into that facility all within our existing permits. We didn't need to adjust the permits in any way in order to, you know, accommodate the shift in using plastic waste as feedstock versus our traditional feedstock. So we haven't seen any. We obviously have to do tests. We have to understand what any profile is for any change to our facilities, and there were no additional incremental emissions coming from our addition of the advanced recycling facility. That being said, I mean, as you heard, we are leveraging our existing footprint, and so we do think it is very important that any advanced recycling facility, you know, be required to comply with all relevant manufacturing related laws. So, you know, there's requirements around air and water from a local, state, and federal level. And, you know, facilities should be required to meet all of the laws in that space.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, I think we have time for a couple more questions, and there's some that have come in around what can be used as feedstock. One question that is, I think, a good one about the circular plastics is, can circular plastics be mechanically recycled? And if not, are they suitable feedstock for advanced recycling?
I thought that was an interesting question when I saw it. So one of the benefits of what we're doing with our Extend technology is that It offers a circular solution for all of the types of plastic that we make. So whether it's polyethylene or polypropylene, we can create those products. And so some of those products could be suitable for mechanical recycling, because again, something that is one type of plastic that can be melted down and created into a new plastic, that material would absolutely and should be mechanically recycled. But then if we have some of our more complex films or different mixes of plastics, which cannot be mechanically recycled, then certainly those would be able to be used as feedstock for advanced recycling. And then one of the benefits of advanced recycling also is that you can continue to recycle because you're breaking down that material right back down to its building blocks to make new plastics. There's really no limitation on how often you could recycle those plastics.
And another question also with feedstock is asking about hospital waste. I know in Laura's presentation, she had mentioned different types of waste that's good for advanced recycling, but is hospital waste something that could be considered for advanced recycling?
Well, I think what we're targeting, I mean, what we are targeting today is, kind of mixed polyolefin materials. So, polyethylene, polypropylene mixed material, like the multi-layer films that you often find that's used in food packaging. And this is material that's been sorted to meet a specification, right? So I think it's really important that, while we'll say plastic waste, it is, material that's been diverted from landfill, incineration, and sorted to a certain specification. So it's not waste. We can't put waste or trash into our system, right? There's some quality parameters and specs that have to be met in order for us to usefully use that material.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And well, I mean, we're pretty much out of time. So thank you, Laura, Kathy, Melanie. I really appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with us today, and also for your commitment to closing recycling gaps in the Great Lakes region. And thank you to all of the attendees who joined us and contributed to the webinar with your questions. I do invite the business community to get in touch with us to join our business and sustainability network and the dialogues we're addressing. Also invite all of the attendees to reach out to us if you have an interest in the Circular Great Lakes Initiative. You will also be receiving a post-webinar survey from us shortly. We'd really appreciate if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts, because we do value your feedback and how we can make these webinars more informative for you. So yeah, thank you very much again, and really appreciate your time, and have a great rest of your day.